going. Okay. All right. I'm assuming you can all see the preparing for competition title slide. If you can't, give me a high sign or catch my attention in the window. No? Thumbs up for everybody? Thumbs up for everyone. All right. And we can go ahead and get started. When I competed in my first let me get started this way. For those of you who don't know me, and there might be one or two of you here, my name is Trish Blackwelder. I am a distinguished Toastmaster 5 times over. Okay. I'm also a past district governor for District 3, and I am the past chief judge for the 2020-2021 term that just completed on June 30th. Okay. I attended the International Convention last week, and as is typical for me, made sure that I got to attend the World Championship of Public Speaking. And after many, many years, more than I'm going to admit to, of studying the world champions, I was very pleased to see how well that the speakers had adapted to a virtual presentation stage from the experience from 2020. If you didn't have a chance to see the World Championship of Public Speaking, make sure you go out to Toastmasters.org and watch the replay when it becomes available. So tonight we are going to talk about competition speaking for the most part, although you'll see that a lot of the world champions of public speaking transition into the professional speaking world as well after they place well or win the annual competition. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about can be applied to your professional speaking career as well. This all started for me back when I competed in my first contest after less than a year after joining Toastmasters. I placed second, and that was okay. But what I was really disappointed about was that I went to the chief judge after the contest and I said, when do I get to see my scores? And the chief judge was very polite and said, you don't. And I go, what? And I got very upset with him. You see, my argument was that in an organization whose backbone is built off getting feedback every time you perform a role, including speaker, why would we not get feedback as contestants? He was very patient with me, and the conversation or the debate went on for probably 15, 20 minutes before he finally just had to tell me, look, you're not going to get them. Okay. And I left, and I never wanted to compete again. And that was part of my reason for getting interested in what goes on behind the curtain of a contest, because my club did not do a good job of preparing me for the competition. I did not know all of those things that I should be expecting, and especially the one that was most important to me, not being able to get that. So over the years and many, many contests later, I'm still crushed at what I see happen at contests continually. Peers, friends, family, you know, all the support people that come along to a contest to, you know, cheer you on and, you know, root for you. Then they do the most awful things after the contest is over. As I walk through the room, I hear it and see it all the time. Those peers, friends, and family that love you, telling you that you were robbed. Not true. It's just not true. Okay? There are reasons that you didn't win, and those reasons are what you need to learn in order to be able to improve yourself. These situations were the impetus behind us founding Showtime Toastmasters, because we wanted to be able to give speech contestants more of that behind the curtains experience. We wanted them to understand what really went into being a competitor and how to prepare both mentally and physically. because it really is more than just preparing a speech. The speech is only one part of it. But if you don't understand the other two parts of it as well, you will generally not have a very pleasurable experience. So tonight, I'm hoping to give you the key points that we have learned through our 16-year journey as a club and my little longer than that journey in studying the world champions of public speaking. So let me pause there and hear if there's anything else somebody really wants to get out of tonight. Is there a question that you came just dying to get an answer for so that I can make sure I address it if at all possible?
Yes, Trish.
Honey,
Did you keep your record? Did you call the winners? Is your record still intact?
I did call the winner this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was palpable. Nancy and Bobby and I were on chat while we were watching the World Championships, and all three of us immediately said, that's it. Yeah, it was palpable. And that may sound odd for a virtual contest, but that's how good the contestants were at adapting to the virtual speaking stage this year. Anyone else have something that they just have to get an answer for? Okay, you do not get rewarded for being quiet in my workshops. Just letting you know. All right, at least you're smiling. Okay, let's dig in. What are the areas that it really takes that you have to prepare in order to be able to compete? Yes, we all know that there's a speech, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But the first thing on the list is you need to get a copy of the contest rules. So many contestants just think that they know, or that someone has told them, or that their coach will prepare them for what's in the contest rule book. But you need to know the contest rule book. If there's a protest, you need to know what to expect. If there's a challenge, if you think you have a right to challenge as a speaker, you need to know how to handle that. And those things are spelled out specifically in the contest rules. So do not take the contest rule book for granted. It is something that if you are going to enter this arena, you need to become very familiar with. Another thing that you need to be prepared or to prepare with are electronics. Rarely is there going to be a contest anymore going forward that will not involve electronics. Microphones, lapel mics, headphone mics, behind the head mics. There's all kinds of different microphones today, and you will be at the mercy of the event or the location in terms of what equipment that they have. You need to know how to properly adjust a mic. If you had to use a handheld mic, what's that going to do with your gestures? Are you ready to adapt to that? If you're using earplugs like I am and a boom mic like this, where do you put it? You don't put it right in front of your mouth where they hear you breathe and smack your lips then. It needs to stay about 1.5 inches away from your actual mouth. You also don't want to let the mic get too close to your nose. How many contests have I gone to where I've gotten to hear not only the speech, but the entire breathing exercise of the contestant through the speech? Those are distractions and they cost you points. All right. The other thing that many contestants don't explore enough is getting themselves coaches and mentors. Not just any coach. This is not the time to pick your best friend. This is the time to pick someone who has some experience or at least knowledge of the competitive scene. They need to understand how it works. They need to be familiar with the rules. They need to understand microphones. They need to have some experience at crafting good winning speeches so that they can help you craft yours. And then last but not least, there will be actually crafting that competition speech. And don't think you're going to write it overnight or do it just by going out there and speaking. This takes preparation, folks, and you need to allow yourself time. I was very surprised to hear that the world champion of public speaking that won the contest on Saturday had prepared the winning speech just 100 days ago. Even she said she was surprised that she managed to pull it all together, and not just pull it all together, but actually win the competition. Now, I'll give her some credit because her semifinal speech was a very strong speech. Again, palpable, even in a virtual space. There was no doubt in my mind she was going to advance to the finals. So if you're allowing yourself anything less than 100 days, rethink that decision because you really need to give yourself time. Part of the impetus for this presentation was an experience I had when a member came to me and asked me if I would coach them to compete in a contest season. I said I would because I thought they had a lot of potential. But the first thing I did when I sat down with them was I talked about the things I'm talking with you now. We're going to have to practice. You're going to have to practice. You're going to write and rewrite the speech probably 100 times. You need to get in environments where you can work with a mic. You need to know how to mic yourself if you have to, if you end up in that situation. You need to know what the basic operating principles are on those electronics so that you don't accidentally turn yourself off during a speech. They thought that the electronics were fun. They were glad that they had me as a coach. They were not prepared to even write their speech on paper, let alone write it and rewrite it over and over again. And the contest rule book, I'll bet money they never read past the first page. They thought they could wing it and get through it, but it showed from the very first contest they competed in, and it became a sore spot between us because I kept insisting that they send me a written copy of the speech to work from, and then coach them from live recordings from them doing the speech over and over again. And when all was said and done, they ended up DQing themselves because they decided the night before to rewrite their speech again, only in their head. Yeah. This is competition. If you've watched the Olympics or any other type of sport, you know that these people work long and hard to master the craft. And this is what it takes to be able to compete. Every year there's a contest season. Every year there's an international speech. So it should come as no surprise to you that if you want to compete, you know what the timeline is going to be to get ready. So I have always advised that people start preparing their speech in the fall before the spring international speech contest so that they have plenty of time to practice and get plenty of feedback. Now, let me just give you a couple of quotes I picked up on Saturday after the World Championship. The winner put it this way: you are putting yourself in the spotlight as a contestant, and you have to get over yourself. You decide you have a message to deliver, and you are experimenting to find the best way to deliver it. You push yourself into a situation where you have to give it everything, not some of it, everything. Third place winner put it this way: you don't compete to win, you compete out of a dedication and a commitment to your message. Especially in the international speech contest, it really is about the message that's your content is framing and delivering. So let me pause here and see if anybody has any questions or comments about this, because this is the heavy part. Kathy.
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. And being an area director, I'll be presenting a lot of this information to the clubs, and I foresee a couple of questions that might come back. I think you already answered one about how far in advance should a person plan to prepare their speech, and you're looking at 4 to 6 months, you're saying?
At least.
4 to 5 months, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and the second question is, now in this virtual setup that we have, if we don't do the live competition this year, each person has to prepare with their own electronics, correct? Or can they bring electronics to a competition and use their own?
Not to an
They have their
in-person. No, not to an in-person. You can't bring your own electronics.
Okay.
I am not an audio specialist, but there's a lot of black boxes and they all have to work together with the sound system in the auditorium. So you can't just walk in with your own stuff and use it.
So basically you get to know John Griffith real well. So become friends. with
John Griffith and Jeff Gores and a whole lot of ones that
Yeah.
Prince Leftridge that have all operated the sound equipment. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Okay, so if you're still on board and you've still decided that you want to compete, all right, then what comes next? Let's talk a little bit now about crafting that speech. You can increase your odds of winning by understanding the difference between a project speech and a contest speech. They are not, I repeat, not the same. Education program speeches are intended to be based on project objectives where you craft content that contributes to the purpose and objectives of that project. It's very specific. There's no score in an educational program speech. There's not even a pass-fail. When you do it, when you give the speech, you get the credit, no matter whether you liked it or not. But the intent is to get you to craft a speech that will help you meet the purpose and objectives of the educational project. These speeches are also not intended to be perfect. They are designed to be experiential learning, where you will now learn how to improve from having delivered the speech and having received feedback on the speech. Lastly, speech titles are not specifically called out as part of the evaluation and therefore are not considered critical to the project objectives as a whole. I can give you a speech about parking a car and I can call it anything I want that doesn't even relate to parking a car in an educational speech. My evaluator, if they're advanced, might give me some feedback about not tying the pretty bow on the package, but I don't lose any points because my title isn't relevant to my speech content. All right, anybody want to debate me about speech program or educational program speeches?
I'm not going to debate you, Trish, no way.
Oh, good. Oh, wait, you are or aren't?
No, I'm not. I do have a comment though. I think that it helps a lot to be speaking frequently, even if it's a speech. Yeah, I don't know, a manual speech or a pathway speech. If you do that often, then at least you feel you get the practice going to be in front of the public and also crafting your speech. And I agree with you, they are not the same, they're totally different.
Thank you, Tony, for supporting me. Sorry, somebody was chatting too. All right. So we're all in agreement about what an educational speech is then. Okay, Now let's talk about contest speeches. Contest speeches are intended to successfully deliver a message. There is no margin for error in the delivery of this speech. Speech titles will also matter now because they are part of the unified whole of the message. And lastly, the only opinions that will count are those of the judges. And they aren't going to tell you anything. They are going to score you, though, based on their opinion on how well you met the criteria. So not the audience, not the peers, not your friends, not your family, or for that matter, not even your opinion is going to count. This speech is for the judges, and they are looking for a message that is well delivered according to criteria. I will pause to see if anybody wants to debate me.
I'm not debating. I just have a question.
Yes.
So you never get feedback
You
from
never
the
get
judges at all? Nothing.
Never, ever.
Which is why it's always good to take another Toastmaster with you to evaluate you.
Right. You will never see the judges' score sheets. They're destroyed. So you cannot approach a judge in the meeting space or in the parking lot afterwards. They are not allowed to talk to you. As are it's the same thing with the functionaries. The ballot counters are, lips are sealed. Timers' lips are sealed. Judges and chief judges' lips are sealed. Yep, that's
If
it.
you spoke to one judge, you wouldn't make a difference because there's only one opinion. You would need to talk to all of them to even get a real picture.
Well, that is true, but don't put a judge in an awkward position by trying to approach them in the parking lot or in the room, because they can only tell you the same thing that the chief judge told me at my first contest. You're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. I cannot share it with you, period. And they'll walk away. Okay. Second place champion from Saturday referred to this process as creating the art of public speaking, of delivering your message in an artful way. And when we flip to the next slide, I think that'll start to make sense. I've never heard it said that way, but I'm stealing it, and that's how I'm going to say it forever now going forward. This is the judging criteria. This is what the judges have committed to developing their scores from. They are not supposed to just say, oh, I like that one, okay. They are actually supposed to be able to justify their score through this criteria. That does not mean that if you protest, you will get to find out how they judged you. A protest is limited to specific grounds, in most cases, originality. Someone decides to regurgitate someone else's speech from history. That's not original, and they would be disqualified for trying to do that. So this, again, comes off the judges form, which is another one of the resources that you need to study carefully when it comes time to craft your speech. I don't want to go into all the weeds here, but we'll review it really quickly. Speech development, effectiveness, speech value, those account for 50% of your score. And the types of things that judges are looking for in your presentation are the things that you see underlined in red on the screen. There's also 3 questions that judges are supposed to ask themselves, such as, was I able to determine the speaker's purpose? Did the speech relate directly to that purpose? Was the audience's interest held by the speaker? And was the speech subject appropriate for this particular audience? These questions fall under the category of effectiveness. So that gives you some idea from a judge's point of view, the types of things they are now looking for in effectiveness. Let's go back to speech development. It is a speech. Therefore, there are some parameters that are expected to be hit, such as being able to put ideas together so the audience can understand them. So often we hear a very esoterical speaker who's very out there, and it's a great message and it's done with enthusiasm and passion, but you can't follow the message to save your skin because you can't think like that speaker. And that's one way that speakers often end up losing the contest. Your speech has to be structured around a purpose, just as I was quoting the third place champion from Saturday. You are delivering a message and you're supposed to do it in an artful way, but the message is the important part of the speech. The speech also has to include an opening, a body, and a conclusion, and it should move towards a significant conclusion, which is the inspirational and persuasive part here of what the judges are looking for. Too many contestants lose the contest in the first minute to minute and a half because their opening does not immediately engage the audience's attention. You've got to get them up in their seat, leaning into you, knowing that they want to hear what you have to say. Many openings are just not powerful enough to do that. As you develop the speech, you're still going to need to have relevant examples, illustrations, facts, figures, whatever is appropriate for your message. And then delivering all of this with such smoothness that it blends into the framework of a speech to present the audience with a unified whole. And that unified whole is what I don't hear enough contestants talking about. It really has to gel together. It has to be a journey on a message that makes sense from start to finish, and that every movement, every piece of vocal variety, every gesture, every word choice contributes to that message and to the conclusion of the message. Speech value reinforces that because it says you are supposed to say something meaningful and original to the audience. Again, often hear contestants that are stealing other people's ideas. They heard this, they read this, this really impacted their life, but they did nothing over the course of the speech then to make it original to them. What I heard on Saturday, a couple of the things that I've heard on Saturday from the speakers has now impacted me. I will talk about artfully crafting now. I will talk about the message and how important it is and being true to yourself and authentic to yourself. These are words that I've picked up that will now become part of the way I evaluate and the way I coach and I talk about competitive speaking. Delivery includes physical, voice, and manner, and it makes up 30% of your score. Appearance will count. That doesn't mean you have to go out and buy a $300 outfit, but appearance will count. Is your shirt pressed? Is your jacket well-fitting? Are your shoes polished? I've seen people show up with the black marks on white shoes on the back from driving in the car. That should have been cleaned off. The shoes should have been bagged. The tennis shoes should have been used to drive to the contest and then put on the nice, clean, polished, crisp looking shoes when you're ready to get into the room and compete. I remember when I competed in the evaluation contest, the feedback that I got after the first contest that I won was from a fashionista fashionista friend of mine who told me, it's the shoes, honey, don't lose those shoes. But they were a stylish pump that I kind of wore as a fluke that night. And I bagged those puppies and I took them with me to every single contest after that. Whether they slenderized my leg, whether it was just that they were fashionable shoes or what, but it helped put the outfit together and put me together apparently. And I was not going to take any chances that she was wrong. As you are doing body language, remember, every gesture is going to count. This 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 and this is going to account. And it's all supposed to be supporting the message. The gestures, the facial expressions, your body positioning, which you'll hear me refer to as staging. All of this has to support your message. One of the resources I'm going to tell you about today talks about the 110 skills of an excellent communicator and leader. And they do a little opening at the beginning of their TED Talk where they actually demonstrate positive language countered by negative gesturing. It's really fascinating to take a look at that. And these are the kinds of things that you need to become familiar with, study, and learn if you're going to compete and win. The speaker makes effective use of and stays within the designated speaking areas. And to Kathy's comment earlier, right now we think spring will be in person, but there's still a chance it could go to in person or into virtual, and you don't know, but that won't change you and how you craft your speech. It may change your staging, it may change your body language, but it will not change your speech substantially. Voice though, voice needs to carry. In an in-person contest, you'll see judges gravitate to the back of the room because if they can't hear you in the back of the room, they know you are not projecting. That will cost you big time in a speech. So you have to be able to project to the back of the room. Your voice also has to be flexible. It has to move from pitch to pitch and add emphasis and should have a variety of rate and volume. All of these things, again, are supporting your message. They can't just be, I'm throwing in a high voice now so I can drop to a low voice later, if it doesn't make sense to the message and your delivery. You have to be clearly heard. You have to be easily understood. Now, when it comes to contestants that English is their second language, Vasiliev has excellent training around what he did to win the World Championship of Public Speaking. And it basically came down to two things. He had to use fewer words and he had to speak at a slower rate. That gave him time to enunciate his words to the best of his ability and time for his audience, in particular the judges, to make sure they heard the words and understood his message. So there's just two suggestions in that category there. And then manner. You're supposed to speak with enthusiasm and assurance, but that actually starts from the minute you step up on the stage. When you step on the stage, you have to own it. Own the stage, come to the center, do the handoff from the Toastmaster to you. Face your audience with confidence and assurance, and you are prepared to speak. From the very first gesture or the very first word, you are going to grab your audience's attention and take them on a journey with you. You also need to make sure that when you're crafting, you're doing it for the interest of your audience. Wouldn't do any good to do a speech about a 64 Ford Mustang when 95% of your audience won't understand what you're talking about. So One of the interviewees during the contest said, yes, it's a message, but it has to be a universally acceptable message, something that everybody can get engaged with and follow along. And then finally, we've got language, 20% of your score. This comes down to word choices. Are you going to use nickel word or quarter word? Are you going to use a word that has universal understanding, or are you going to use something trendy that may not be understood by every audience member? Several of the top 3 talked about going out virtually and attending clubs in all countries around the world to practice their speeches, because they wanted to learn whether any of the word choices they had in their speeches might be unfavorable in some countries or misunderstood in some countries, and they had to rewrite accordingly. Especially as you advance in the international contest, you can very well end up getting judges and audience members alike that are not going to be from the United States. And so it can't be something that they won't be able to understand. It also needs to fit the occasion. If you're doing an international speech, those are generally more motivational or inspirational. And that doesn't mean motivational rah, rah, rah. If you remember the cha-ching speech, that was a very great speech, but the cha-ching was a motivator, and it was also an identifier for every time the point of his message came up in the story. And when we're talking about correctness, proper grammar and correct pronunciation does count at this point, and attention should be directed to what you said and not necessarily how you said it. Now, that kind of conflicts a little bit with what I talked about with the holistic approach on the content, but you don't want the judges turning into grammarians. What you want them to turn into is great word choice for presenting that perspective or that concept or that idea, or great series of word choices tying the message together and helping it build from start to finish. All right, so there's a crash course from a chief judge in judging criteria. We don't want to get too far down in the weeds, but I am willing to take some questions or comments at this time.
I just want to make a quick overall comment. One of the things when I was studying communication that my professor always told us was, when you're having a conversation with somebody, you should periodically always check to make sure that what they're hearing is what you said. And anytime that I've heard of anybody who has risen to the international stage, they have asked every time they have presented a speech, what did I tell you? What did I say? What did you hear? And I think that that's like incredibly important to continue to check that right up until the time you give your last speech in your life. But still, you know, to always ask, what did you hear? What did I say? So I just wanted to kind of throw that in since we were at this criteria.
Yes. And let me just piggyback on what Marilyn had said. One of the clubs that I'm in actually has that question at the bottom of the evaluation form. What was the message you heard? So that they can write it right there. And when the speaker gets those feedback sheets back, they can look at them and find out whether the audience really heard the message they wanted them to hear. It doesn't do any good if I'm practicing for a competition and I tell you what I want you to hear. I need to know that you got it from the message that I delivered. Anyone else? Thank you, Marilyn. No?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about how to tie in your title to your message and why?
Oh, Connie, I think we could do an entire session around that. I've always felt from what I've studied with the World Championships that your title should not give away your message. It should not give away what you're going to be talking about. It should entice people to want to hear what you're going to talk about. And my favorite example of that is the speech that was titled "The Swami's Question." During the entire speech, the topic of the Swami's question never came up, but everything that was said from start to the point of the conclusion built up to him going to the Swami and having the Swami ask the question. And so that to me is one of the best examples of how your speech title, I wanted to hear when somebody gives me a speech title of the Swami's question, don't you want to know what the question was? And that starts the enticement, that starts the engagement right there. And then as he built the speech and got to the point where he actually was going to have the Swami ask him a question, then you were right there. It wasn't a surprise. It got there, and it got there in a way that built momentum, and it set up the conclusion of the speech. Does that help you, Connie?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's move on. Now, some of you have seen this before, and I'm just not ready to let it go yet. I haven't entirely gotten over myself yet. But I like it because it's simple. If I bring up another chart that I've recently acquired this weekend, you would probably all pass out from it. It has all of the 110 skills on it. So, and it's like reading what is it? Of all the gases and minerals and stuff.
Periodic table.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the word, the periodic table. Yeah. But from a simple judge's point of view, if we take now content, delivery, and language, and we talk about some of the elements of the speeches, like the title, the foundation of your message, okay, the close of your message, the framing of your story, the staging of your story, and then the point. What kinds of questions do I tend to ask myself as a judge when it comes to these categories? Did the title, so titles, does the title make sense? Did the title entice me? Did the title resonate with the point? The example that I just shared with you about the Swami's question, I think is one of the best examples I have. When I talk about the foundation of a story, this is going to be your journey. If you think of a canoe ride, down the rapids, then you're starting at the top, you're going to finish at the bottom of the rapids, and the undercurrent is the river that keeps things moving along. This is that holistic concept of your message. Does it start? Does it keep carrying you forward? And does it reach the conclusion? This is the journey. Is it predictable? Is it adventurous? Is it chaotic? Is it shallow? Is the current, the undercurrent, shallow, deep, smooth, fractured? All of these things are things that I ask myself as a judge when I'm trying to evaluate how I'm going to score effectiveness. When we get to the close, does the close tie back to the title? Does the close reinforce the point, which is probably the biggest thing? And does the close, in fact, close the loop on the message, on the journey through the message in such a way that you get it, that you just get it? When it comes to delivery, two words that you'll hear me use a lot are framing and staging. Framing about the story is like the bookends, okay? The framing holds up the story. How is the momentum of the story generated? Is it iterative? Is it going to be a series of vignettes? Is it transitions, and are those transitions smooth? Is it passive? Is it aggressive? Is it artificial? I've seen some deliveries on contest speeches that are just so physically demanding. I'm surprised they have any breath left to do the conclusion at the end. But if it works, it works. Okay. I'm not saying they should all be that way. I'm just saying if it works, it works. And they don't all work that way. But anyway, staging, on the other hand, is your use of your speaking area. So this now is a synergy between words, nonverbal, nonverbal actions, gesturing, I said gesturing, body movement, and stage position. Randy Harvey, in his Lessons from Fat Dad, was the workshop where my light bulb went off about this, because he talked about the, that his dad was a flannel shirt, and smooth and warm and comforting, but he never told you the color of the flannel shirt because he didn't want to give you, the audience, any preconceived notions. He let each audience member just experience the feeling and memory of a flannel shirt without ever revealing the colors, so that if I saw it in blue and Marilyn saw it in green and Bobby saw it in red and somebody else saw it in charcoal, it didn't matter. It didn't interrupt the audience's experience with that part of his speech. Okay. On the other hand, he also had a part of his speech where he was supposedly standing on top of the hood of a car because dogs were trying to bite him. And he used a chair as jumping up on the top of the hood of the car. So he used the air above the stage to deliver part of his speech. And I'm out of frame right now, but that's how high it was, okay? So he went up into the air and used the air. If you've ever heard of air rights in buildings, okay? People buy air rights. It's the same kind of thing. 3D speaking is about using horizontal, vertical, forward and backward, left diagonal, right diagonal, every part that you have available to you. And that applies both in person and virtually. The difference is your virtual frame will be much more restrictive. So you really have to make it count in a virtual space. In a stage space, in person, you have much more speaking area to cover. And then finally, appropriate and correctness kind of lead to the point. What was the message? Is the message succinct? Did the message affect me as the judge? These are the things that I'm asking myself to take into consideration when I'm determining what my score in those categories is going to be. Now, since we've chartered Showtime in 2005, I've done my best to kind of pass these skills along. But being able to give an advanced evaluation comes from an enlightened point of view. It's not until you it's like putting yourself in a warm bubble bath. You have to kind of immerse yourself in it and just let it happen to you and experience it all. And then your mind starts to expand and become more open to these new concepts. And the way that you do that is by hanging out and completely immersing yourself. So often I think people come to workshops like this and they say, oh, that was really great. And then they don't do anything with it. You have to do something with this for it to become ingrained in you. Again, this graphic is by no means as advanced as I would like it to be, but it's a step. And I hope it's a step that most people can at least understand. That perhaps now you can see how speech development is based on being defined along with the judging criteria. And then ending with these questions, these checkpoints that I routinely ask myself in order to make sure I keep that holistic point of view on the speaker, the staging, and the delivery. The audience's reaction is really not going to factor in unless you're competing in person. And that's where the engagement with your audience has to almost become palpable and persuasive for it to truly have an impact on the judges. I remember going to the 2019 World Championship of Public Speaking in person, and the very first speaker that spoke, the electricity in the room, you couldn't avoid feeling it. And I leaned over to Nancy and I said, it's gonna win. Unless somebody is just phenomenal, that will be the winning speech. And sure enough, it was. So a lot of speakers will say, well, I can't win if I'm the first speaker. Yes, you can. You just have to You have to knock everybody's socks off, and then you can win. Another thing is that framing and staging, you think, oh, well, I don't really like those words. I'm not going to really pay that much attention to them. But let me tell you, as a judge, when I teach contest judges, I teach them framing and staging, and they can make the difference between first and second. They can make the difference between being in the top and advancing or not advancing at all. So framing and staging are two things you cannot ignore. All right, break time again. Time for you to speak.
When you talk about framing
Mhm.
the story, are you talking about the different scenes in the story?
I call it bookends, but perhaps I should call it a book. If you're starting a book, it takes you forward all the way through to the end. What will happen sometimes is people will pick, say, 3 vignettes that they're going to talk about as part of their speech. But the vignettes are done in a wanky order that they don't really build on one another. They're 3 good stories, but they don't transition in a creative way and build the momentum towards the conclusion. That's the framing of the story to me, that I'm starting with my opening, I'm building through my body to a significant conclusion at the end. And I need to frame all my content in such a way that it accomplishes that type of momentum. Does that make sense, Tony?
Yeah, you're talking that it should be, you shouldn't actually, it should sound like a single story. Even if
Yes.
you have several, you have the transitions and all that, but it should be unite. You need to unite everything so they relate to each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
What will happen sometimes with contestants is they'll get married to parts of their speech and they won't want to give them up, but they don't fit well with the rest of their speech. And this is part of framing that story. Same reason when a writer writes a story, he has an editor to go back and edit the story, to take out the stuff, that doesn't belong there.
I was thinking that's why you said we need a coach.
That's why you need a coach. Yeah.
That's really good, yeah.
And not just one. You can have multiples if you want. But think of the story that used to be in the Successful Speaker series about the little boy who was watching the carver carve the horses from a block of wood. And the little boy kept asking, how do you do that? And the carver finally said, I just carve away what ain't horse. Okay, now the grammar's not correct, but the concept is your speech, when you first start with it, is a block of wood. And then you have to revisit it and redefine it and tweak it and carve away what ain't speech.
Yeah.
But doesn't belong there. And if you really fall in love with a part of your speech that really doesn't fit, then save it in another file to become a different speech. But take it out of the speech that you're trying to compete with because it doesn't fit there.
Right, right. Okay, when you talk about foundation, are you talking about the structure here?
Not necessarily the structure. I'm talking about the anchors that are in the story itself. How is the story carrying you from one thought to the next thought? Okay. It kind of goes along a line, a little bit with the framing, other than I talk specifically about things like transitions and vignettes and passive aggressive type, situations in framing, where with the foundation, it's not so obvious. It's the undercurrent that carries the story along. If I started off with a red flannel shirt and I end with a green flannel shirt, there's a disconnect now between the undercurrent of my story. I flipped shirts, and if I didn't do that as part of my message, then it doesn't make sense. Okay, there's inconsistency there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you watch any kind of a series on TV, they have someone who's like the storyline, editor person that makes sure that if this episode left off here, that the next episode picks up where it left off, so that you don't jerk the audience around. There's, if the ship was about to go over, if the canoe was about to go over the waterfall, and that's where the episode stopped, you wouldn't pick it up with the ship now on a different river. That would just be jolting. Okay.
Yeah.
So that
Continuity
undercurrent
director.
has to stay consistent. Mhm. Sorry,
Yeah,
Marilyn.
that's your continuity director.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to learn new words tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes if you have two stories, that's the problem. You don't know when to begin with the next one.
Yes, and that's why you have to be very careful about the stories that you're going to choose.
Yeah.
It goes back to my comment that some contestants get married to parts of their speeches, and I can tell right there they won't advance. They won't advance very far, because they just can't let go of something that they're married to that doesn't fit in the speech.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Rest of you are being way too quiet.
Hi, Trish. I have a question. This is
Sure.
Robin. I'm a little confused, I guess, about why you're putting this concept of framing the story under delivery as opposed to content, because it seems like it's fitting more in with what you're saying the foundation is. To
Well,
me, it seems like delivery is more, I mean, not only what you're saying, but can I picture it or visualize what you're talking about?
But if you think about the foundation in the content area as being that undercurrent that we were just talking about
Mhm.
crafting something that has continuity, that continues from the start
Mhm.
to your finish, that's definitely part of your content. That's what you're crafting. When it comes to your delivery, then that framing of that content and getting it from the start to the finish, now with body language, gesturing, staging, vocal variety, all the other stuff that comes into play there. Passive, aggressive, artificial, that's where those words came in, because some people just become way over the top and it just doesn't feel natural at all for the speech. So it's a fine line as you're drawing attention to, but that's how I broke them out in my mind. When I'm looking at content, I'm looking for that undercurrent. This is me as a judge. Somebody else might do differently. Me as a judge, I'm looking in content for that undercurrent to pull me all the way through the speech. Whereas in the framing part of the delivery, I'm looking for all those transitions, all of that additional body language and stuff, making all those things make sense.
Okay, so that's more how you're carrying it out. I guess what was bothering me was iterative vignettes, that kind of thing. Vignette makes me think of, I'm describing something, of putting it in the story. You're thinking more of, am I actually showing that?
Yeah, the other
Somehow
thing
through all
about
those other features.
But the other thing about vignettes is those come into staging. Okay, where are you going to be on the stage? Randy Harvey was quite emphatic about saying that whenever he spoke about his mother, it was always from this part of the stage. It was subliminal. You wouldn't have even realized that he was doing it. When he talked about his dad, he was talking from a different part of the stage and from another character in his speech that was part of the continuity. He talked in a different place, and so it all, you don't want to just draw lines here. It has to become a holistic whole, and that's why it's so hard to break down, and why I'm probably going to lose this example as soon as I can get unmarried from it, because it does that. It tends to make people want to draw lines where there aren't supposed to be lines. It's supposed to be all blended together.
It's holistic. Yeah, and that is exactly one of the things that I always look for is, are people placing the people they're talking about or places that they're going to at the same place on the stage? Yeah. Just what you were talking about.
Yeah, but even then, it shouldn't be audience. It shouldn't be obvious. I shouldn't be talking about this thing over here. And then, oh, now I have to talk about my mom. Okay, I have to jump back over here again. It shouldn't be that way. It should all just be smooth. You shouldn't even realize that all of a sudden I'm to a different part of the stage and I'm back to talking about my mom again. You should just be going along for the ride and going, this makes me feel comfortable. I know this place. I know what we're doing here. It makes sense to me.
Okay, good. That helps.
Okay.
Thanks, Trish.
Okay. Someone asked me a question earlier and I said to hold on because the answer was coming in a few slides. Recommendation number 3 is to get feedback from qualified judges and DTMs. You increase your odds of winning by securing feedback from qualified judges and DTMs, not club members. And I think this is the thing that one of the things that got driven home with me this weekend was how many of the stories from the people that made it to the final stage talked about going outside of their club in order to get their feedback. Again, they were all crafting messages that not only had to be personal messages, but had to be translated universally for a worldwide audience. And the only way to get that kind of feedback was to go out to those other countries and get feedback from those people. And the reason that I say don't depend on your club members is not because I'm, discounting club members. Some of them are very good evaluators, but your audience isn't your club members, and it's not your peers, and it's not your family, and it's not your friends. Remember, in a competition speech, your audience are your judges, and you have to engage them. So get your feedback from people that understand judging. That's the kind of feedback that you're looking to get. Not that, oh, that was a great speech. No, that's not what I need if I'm a competitor. I need, why was it a great speech? What was it about it that you thought was great? Because those are things I want to hold on to, and I want to check the rest and find other great things to put in their place. What hurts me saying this is how hard it will be to find these people. Okay. Last contest season, as the chief judge, I went on the hunt for 191 qualified judges to add to the judges pool. I found 52. We have a problem in District 3 in that everybody thinks you can compete without contributing anything to the quality of our competitive environment in District 3. We do not have enough qualified judges. It becomes everyone's responsibility then to encourage good evaluators to go outside their club and study becoming a judge. Some won't want to, but many probably will. And we need to build up a base of qualified judges sufficient enough to cover the number of divisions we have with all those clubs, area, and division contests, not to mention the district level judge. The other thing is, and this is another tough one for me to have to say, I have watched competitors come forward year after year after year after year. I want them to compete. I want them to be successful. I sincerely do. But they're rarely listening to anyone else's opinions besides the ones from their immediate club members, the ones they like. Speaking continues to evolve. It's a living, breathing skill. And when you don't stay in touch with what's going on in a competitive speaking world, then your speaking style becomes dated and aged. And this is what's happening to some really great speakers. This is their speaking style. They're sticking to it. They're not going to change it. This is the way they've always done it. Their cronies in their club tell them that it's fantastic and it works for them. And then the next thing you know, they can't advance anymore because other contestants with styles that are more suited or following speaking trends are evolving, and the other competitors are not. They are crafting their speeches based on non-judges' points of view rather than getting feedback from qualified judges. And this was, again, a huge rationale for why we chartered Showtime. We wanted qualified judges as members so that we could get those points of view into our evaluation program. Okay, I'm not going to preach about Showtime here. Let me open this up. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
So
Well, I'll preach for like 30 seconds and say that really Showtime has taught me over the years so much about improving my evaluation skills that it's not even something I can measure anymore. The difference between my evaluations when I started with Showtime and what they are now, no contest.
So Trish,
Bobby?
I know that you have been studying the international speeches for years, like over a decade, probably closer to 2 decades. And I would like to know, in a nutshell, what are some of the trends you see happening in winning speeches right now?
You know, there used to be a formula, like the first world championship I went to was in 2003, but it wasn't until 2005 when I heard Randy Harvey break it down in 3D in his workshop that my light bulb went off. And I contribute that light bulb, you know, I owe Randy Harvey a lot because I ended up winning then the evaluation contest at the district level, something I would have never thought I was going to do. And between the shoes and what I learned at the workshop, apparently I was selected the winner. That really got me hooked on studying the world champions. So yes, I've been studying world champions now since 2003. You guys do the math. But I will tell you that when I won the district evaluation contest was when I realized that it had sunk in and I had learned something. And I stole a line from someone else when I heard them get ready to evaluate a speaker. They started off as an evaluator by saying this: Bobby, may I have your permission to do my best job as an evaluator to make you a better speaker? And hopefully Bobby said yes to me at that point. Most speakers do want to improve, but I asked for permission because it gave me an opportunity then to be not super critical, but give a critical evaluation. When Dr. Smedley started this program, critical evaluations was not a negative word. It was not a negative phrase at all. But as society has evolved, the word critical has become negative. So we don't say it like it is. But I can give you a whitewash evaluation that will make you feel good, or I can give you a critical evaluation that will give you fine points that you can latch onto and improve with. So I'm still going to say critical evaluation. And that is the type of thing that has to evolve. We have to continue to challenge ourselves to give advanced evaluations to our members. And that will also include talking about ideas that align with certain trends. From 2003 to probably about 2007, there was a formula. You could see it in the competitors. They learned it from the previous champions, and it was almost as though they'd reached cookie cutter speech making, okay? And you pretty much, the judges should just go, yep, they hit all the marks, or they hit the marks really well, or they didn't hit the marks, you know, they missed something. Speech, world champions now tell stories. They tell stories. They're personal stories. They make you react. You can't help but get involved in them. The gentleman who placed second, his semifinal speech was about living in a war zone as a child and some of the horrors that he went through living in that kind of environment. I had tears in my eyes, and I wondered if it was going to be over the top enough that he would not advance. a year ago, we heard the story again from the third place speaker about bias and racism and the difference between her mind and her words, where in her head she thought she wasn't a prejudiced person, but her words and actions told her that she was. And she used the cards to display the bias that wasn't coming out of her mouth or her actions. The speeches are getting tougher. They're getting more personal. They're getting more revealing. They're getting to where it's not just touching your heart. It can make you cry sometimes. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's a trend that if you're going to be competitive, you may have to embrace. Can you go there as a speaker? Can you dig that far deep within yourself? Can you put that much of yourself out on the stage? Can you be that vulnerable? You may need to be. Something to think about. But if you aren't following each year's competitive marketplace, the contestants that end up on the stage. And if you're not watching and listening to them and paying attention, what's different this year than last year? This year, I saw masters of a virtual stage. Last year, I saw people that still struggled with a virtual stage. So that's how far they've come in a year. Where they will be a year from now, whether it's virtual or in person, we don't know yet, but it's hard to say. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go. Okay, I'll stop there. Bobby.
One more quick question about that. You said between 2003 and 2007 or so, there was a formula. How
Yeah.
would you describe that formula since it's out of date?
Oh, you had an opening. And then you had a body. And then you had a conclusion. And they didn't always gel together really well, but you had an opening, a body, and a conclusion, and that's what the criteria said. And so that's, that you met the criteria. Now they totally missed the part about the holistic part, but an opening, body, and a conclusion. You knew what they were going to talk about in their opening. You knew what they were going to talk about in their body, and you knew what they were, going to build to for the conclusion. You may not have known what the takeaway was going to be at the end, but you could tell when they transitioned from the opening to the body to the conclusion. There was always a tell. They either moved on the stage, they stopped and had a big long pause. You could just see how the speaker had studied their opening, studied their body, and studied their conclusion, and then tied them all together for the big day.
So, am I right in hearing that I've heard it said, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them. Is that what the formula was?
That could be part of the formula.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's all of it, but it could be part of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Trish, I guess that's what I noticed on the with all the contestants that participated last Saturday. They all have that structure. They follow that structure. Most of them did. Mm-hmm. But I guess that what brings the real winner there is their creativity, their twist of how they do it. Yeah. And sometimes they need to take you in a direction and then finish in a direction that you didn't expect you would be. Mm-hmm. So that's the twist that I see, and I saw that on the winner, on the
oh yeah,
first
Verity's speech. Once she caught you at the beginning, she never let you go until the end. It was impossible not to stay engaged with her. And she used her entire virtual space too. But it was the holistic approach of a well-told story that kept moving forward with all of the vocal variety, the facial expression, the physical staging, the body language, everything all pulled together. You could not stop listening to that speech. And she did the same thing for me in her semifinal as well. I cried when her camera froze, you know. Well, it didn't really freeze, but the lens got out of focus and she was all blurred. But even then, I had to keep listening to the story because she had me so engaged. And I was hoping that she would bring that to, you know, that same thing to the big stage and not have the camera issue. I was hoping the camera issue wasn't going to take her out of the contest.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a quick clarification. Speeches still have to have a beginning, middle, and end.
Absolutely.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
So if I get what you're saying that that construction is less mechanical, less formatic, and it's more flowing, and it just sort of one thing just leads to another, literally like a river. So that by the time you get to the end, you've just been floating along with the story.
Yeah. You shouldn't, in today's speaking, you don't see the transitions anymore. You see them. You know, it was obviously done some way. You could tell they were moving from one part of their speech to the next. Now you don't see that. It's a blur. It just starts and then it finishes. You know, and you don't want the story to be over kind of thing. You know, it's like, really? We got to the end. But on the other hand, it gets to the end with such a, I get it, that you need the time then to pause and think about what you've just felt, heard, seen, and time to let it absorb. Okay. And what kills me, I'll throw it in now. What kills me, especially in the virtual speaking space, is when I see a speaker give a really good speech, a potential winning speech. And when they finish, they're here. They've got me. I'm on the edge of my seat. And they go, Madam Contest Chair, and reach for their mouse to turn off their camera. It's just like, what the heck did you just do? If you've got me and you are ready to transition back to the contest chair, then you've got me, Madam Contest Chair, and you stay with your audience until you are gone. Then you worry about your computer. It's just like, oh my God. And I saw people doing that in the semifinals. They go, Mr. Contest Chair. And I just go, what are you doing? Yeah, I know the judging technically stops with the last word, but that jarring reaction is going to impact you. You can't avoid it.
Yeah.
All right, Jarrett, do you get the idea of how many clubs you're going to go to, how many places you're going to talk to, how many places you're going to rehearse?
Not as fully exact, because you add the caveat that it's kind of hard to find the clubs with the qualified people. So that adds a new wrinkle.
Yeah.
And you said that they went internationally, so that's a totally different wrinkle as well. As hopefully they will stay in the virtual environment for that to work. If they don't do the virtual environment, it's going to be even harder to find out people with different voices to get that different perspective. If I want to go that route. So you gave me think for thought though.
But if you start immersing yourself now into the world of contests and getting to know the people and the strong clubs with the qualified people, you will have your checklist ready, you know, for where you want to go, where you want to give your speech. Like I said at the beginning, this is not just, oh, I'm going to quickly write a speech, put it, you know, slap a title on it and compete and win. It's not how this works. This takes a lot of lead time and a lot of prep.
And not everybody's going to leave the virtual reality environment. So, you know, they'll still be out there. Don't give up.
And as a transition here, really, for professional speaking, it's the same concept, but now you surround yourself with other professional speakers. You find where those audiences hang out, where those people hang out, and you get yourself immersed in that environment. And then you have people that you can call on to help you when you're working the kinks out of a professional presentation. So in theory, it doesn't change. It's just a different type of audience that you're going after. Instead of judges, you're going after sales or after the people, you know, buying your books or whatever it is. All right, I've got 2 more recommendations. This one's pretty straightforward. You are going to craft, deliver, win, repeat. Craft, deliver, win, repeat. Craft, deliver, win, repeat. For the international speech contest, starts at the club level, then it goes to the area, then it goes to the division, then it goes to the district, then it goes to the region via video, and then it goes to the semifinals, and then it goes to the big stage. So however many layers that was, I forgot to count. That's what you've got to get through. Craft, deliver, win, repeat. Okay. And at some point on that journey, they're going to tell you can't keep using the same speech, that you have to have a different speech. And when you get to the semifinals, should you advance to the big stage, you have to have another speech. So you're doing it 3 times now, 3 speeches, not 1, 3. And I'll never forget at a district contest, our district winner did not know she was going to have a new speech for the regional competition. And that was on her club. I blame her club for not having prepared her for that. I'm glad that we thought to ask her if she knew it, but the bottom line was she should have been prepared for that because she wasted all that time that she could have been crafting that speech.
So this speech that you win the district with is not used at the semifinal? You need another speech for the semifinal, another speech for the final?
Well, what will happen between the district and the semifinal is the regional competition, okay? And there's going to be speech originality judges too that are going to look at your speech, okay, and determine whether or not there's any originality questions in it. So there's a lot that happens between district and semifinal, okay? Most people will take that speech forward to semifinals, but you do have the right to go in with a different speech. And then the transition from semifinals to the big stage is absolutely, you must have a different speech.
So you can have 2 speeches and go with that, but it's better to have 3 for the semifinals.
You know, if you're delivering your first speech and it's not going well, you're kind of squeaking through, you might want to consider going to another speech then. But if you had to start all over writing a speech, what would you do then? How much time would you have?
Yeah.
So it never hurts to have a hip pocket prepared, you know, something in your pocket.
So all 3 of those speeches, you need to go to the same iteration process?
I would hope that if you've taken one speech through, you've picked up on things and made some contacts that you can maybe just shoot an email to somebody and say, these are words I'm considering using in a speech. Can you tell me, you know, if they mean anything different in your culture?
Okay.
Okay. I mean, you don't always have to give the speech. Once you have resources that you can pull on, then you can, you know, use sidebars and private conversations and stuff. All right.
Thanks.
Recommendation number 5 is the very last one. And it's one that almost every contestant forgets to do. They've done the technology, they've studied the rule book, they're ready to go out and command the stage. They've learned the technology, but they never prepared their profile. They did it the day of the contest. They threw some stuff on the paper and said, doesn't matter. Okay. Interviews are not part of the contest. You don't get scored on them. You don't get graded on them, but you make impressions on a whole lot of people in the audience. Never squander your interview. It should come off just as polished, just as confident, just as assured, just as grammatically correct. You can inject a little humor. It's where your personality does need to come out. But this is where people in the room get to know you better. And if you're going to stay in the world of competition, that is always a good thing to have in your pocket. All right, you have crafted your speech. You are ready. You have taken command of the stage. You step out on it, and you, even when you step off of it, you stay in command of your space. Do this every time you appear on stage. Your interview is now your ability to make a good first impression on all the future judges in the audience, and you're never going to waste this opportunity again to make a good first impression. And that concludes my recommendations for how you're going to immerse yourself in the world of competitive speaking. I don't have a Toastmaster tonight, so can we just open this up?
So Trish, I have a quick question. Back to when you were talking about between district and semifinals, is there any type of presentation by the speaker, or is it only the video that goes like to the regional level?
At this point, it's only the video that goes from the district to the region.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So now you've prepared a speech and you're giving it on a live on a stage in person. Did you craft that speech also for how effective it would be on video? Because that's the first question I would ask you. It's the first thing I will look for as a coach if I'm coaching you. All right, this resource list is pretty exhaustive, giving you links to the contest rulebook, the contest profile sheet, because you're all going to pay more attention to that now. Definitely want you to go out to Toastmasters International's YouTube channel, because they've already posted the 3 winning speeches from the International Speech Contest on Saturday. You can go out to the YouTube playlist and use this link, and it will take you right to a list of all the videos associated with the World Champions of Public Speaking. But I mentioned earlier in my presentation about the guy that was doing the 110 techniques of communication and public speaking. He's got about a 15-minute, I think it is, TED Talk at this link, and you're going to want to go watch it because it's eye-opening. So I will be making this presentation available immediately tonight. I'm going to post it in the public area of the Showtime website. So all you people that were here tonight can go out and hit the Showtime website, our public downloads area, in the workshop folder, and you will find a printed copy or a PDF of this presentation for your viewing and studying pleasure. And that concludes my presentation for this evening.
Muy bien, muy bien.
Oh, muy bien. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
No
very much.
comments.